Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections, a podcast all about helping you comfortably connect with others in any situation. Hosted by Leanne and John, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Fortitude at Work. fortitudeatwork.com.au.
Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. I'm Leanne and...
I'm John.
Yay, we got that bit right, Johnny.
We did. We're on a roll.
Yeah, and so we're finally back doing this, aren't we?
Yeah, had a bit of a break, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we had a bit of a hiatus.
What happened there?
Well, we decided, I think, at the end of the last episode that we were going to talk about happiness.
Oh, obviously we've spent the last 6 months going, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
We're not quite happy enough yet. Okay.
In fact, I think it's been more like 12 months.
Oh, really?
Between drinks.
Sorry about that.
But we're back now, aren't we?
We are.
We're not talking about happiness today, and we'll get to that topic in a minute. But I think first we need to just acknowledge that we've really stepped up our performance now, haven't we?
We have. We're doing something a little bit more professional.
Yes.
More efficient.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a bit like a rock star because today we're at the Grove getting our pro on, really, aren't we?
We are.
So that allows for you and I to just chat away without worrying about me fiddling with the microphone.
That's it. And for those of you that are, sitting in the bath or driving in the car and listening to this now, we're going to fill you up and with a whole bunch of wisdom and experience talking about what?
Oh, today we're going to be, what? Sorry, I wasn't listening to you.
Oh, there it is.
What a nice intro.
Segue.
Today we're going to be talking about listening. And how ironic that we're actually presenting the podcast in a way that should be really, really easy to listen to nowadays.
Yeah.
Because we're in a professional studio.
Yeah. It'll be easy to listen to. Easy listening.
Easy listening.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that somewhere before. So we're going to talk about listening. And we talked about this a lot on the way here today about listening. But I guess the first question that I wanted to ask you is, why do you think we have to listen? Because I think I've got friends who don't really listen to me. I love them dearly. They don't necessarily listen. They just wait for me to stop talking.
Just before we do that, on the way here, I was driving from our place to the Grove, and we had a little bit of conflict there because you told me to go a different direction. And at the end of that conversation, I just want to have it recorded what you said at the end of that conversation, just so we've got it down in a recording.
What did I say?
Well, who was right? Just want to get that down. That's all.
Yeah, it was a very rare moment.
It is very rare.
But yes, you were right.
I was right.
You were right.
And you were. So can we get that all? Can we stitch that all together?
I was unusually incorrect.
There you go. Thanks for that.
Unusually incorrect.
It is rare, and give me credit where it's due. When I'm wrong, and I say I'm wrong and you're right, I say that out loud. So I just thought it was fair.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. So we're going to record it for all history.
That's it. And for those people out there that have partners that never want to admit to that, I just want to hear it and have it down.
Okay.
Yeah. So listening.
Okay, let's get back to the topic now that you've, nailed me like that, so to speak.
Yep.
Okay, so we're talking listening. So my first question is, why do we need to listen?
So two human beings listening to each other, is it a good thing?
Yeah, is it a necessary thing, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Is it necessary?
Well, you and I have been on the earth for a while now, and we've been listeners, and we've been someone that's been listened to. So, and we've done that both in our personal and professional lives. So I think it's a fair statement to say that listening is important, and it's about connection. It's about human beings connecting with each other. And I'm sure we talked about this on a previous podcast where we said it can't be underestimated or understated how important it is, connection.
Yeah.
Between human beings. So listening's a very important part of that process, and doing it well, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it is about, fundamentally, it's about connection. And certainly something we talked about earlier is that the research shows that if we want to live a fulfilling, happy life, and there's that word again, which we'll come back to in another episode, but if we want to live a fulfilled and happy life, then perhaps listening is a core skill, because we need connection. And if we actively listen to people, then we demonstrate our willingness to enter their world.
Yeah, and a couple of TED Talks that I've seen recently where they talk about happiness. They also talk about longevity. And they in their research they said that people who are connected to others and to their communities seem to bring the greatest results for a happy and long life.
Yeah, and I mean it's worth exploring a little bit in the context of listening, like that notion of connection. I think because I know that I'm fairly quiet in social settings, and so often when I hear that word connection, it sends a little bit of a shudder up my spine, because I think, oh my God, now I have to actually get out there and talk to people.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily about a cast of thousands, is it?
No, it was strangely though, and I've said this before, you don't connect well in small social groups, but for some reason you can stand up in front of thousands and have all of this confidence to talk about your subject choice.
Yeah, that's probably worth exploring in a different episode.
Yeah, and I'm the other way around, right? In small social settings, I'm annoying, but put me in front of a crowd and I just clam up. That really that gets me. So
yeah, that's true. So, and I guess the point to be made there is that connection doesn't have to be, life of the party and extroverted. It can actually be just a quality connection you have with maybe only one or two people in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's actually okay.
And that saying about you can count your closest friends on one hand. Older people towards the end of their lives will say that. Yeah. The real friends are on one hand.
And in fact, we've been hearing quite a lot I think, in the news generally about the power of connection and living well and healthy living and being connected with others. There's many ways of doing that. And I guess what I like about listening, it kind of gives you a entry point into many choices on how you might connect with people. So for me, I know I'm working in the small business sector, and I think the more effective I am at listening to other small business people, the better I am in offering my services and my support.
Yeah.
If you say, for example, you'd seen on the news that connecting and being part of your community is important for healthy living, well, you could go out and do something in a social setting with a volunteer group or a community group. And if you're a good listener of others, then it's probably easier to connect with that group.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's like a core skill that probably opens the door for lots of different situations. And
those relationships that you're talking about, where you have a relationship with someone, where you have a conversation, where it's an equal conversation with equal time, if you like, and you're both listening and being present to each other, you both leave that experience the better for it.
Yeah.
And my experience when I'm involved in counselling, those relationships I have with either individuals or couples or on the phone. I recognised years ago that every one of those relationships that I leave, I know a little more.
Yeah.
And I take that with me to the next client or friend or relationship.
Yeah.
So it's not all about talking at people. It's about taking in and giving equally.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, the better you are at listening to one person, the better you might be communicating with the next person.
That's it. And what you take from that is just as important as what you give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of what the limited education I've had around Indigenous Australians and how important storytelling has been in their culture. So their culture's been built on listening skills.
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
and the sharing of stories.
Those stories that go down through the generations, that's how they connect with their ancestors.
Yeah,
It's an important part of their culture, and I get that. And the same with the Kiwis as well.
yeah,
The Maoris
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what we're really doing is saying that we take it for granted that we're going to listen to people, but it's actually a really core, valuable skill that you can use to get out there in the world
Yeah.
easily,
Yeah.
I guess.
And you can
So,
use that in your personal relationships, your business relationships,
Yeah.
sales. All of those relationships in all parts of your life. If you can find a comfortable way to communicate where you can be heard and also to listen actively, then that will the value from you and the person you're being with is great, and it's equal.
Okay, so let me just call this then, Johnny, and probably stating the obvious, but I'll bet.
Sorry, we're going to continue with calling me Johnny.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, that's fine. Yep.
I'll bet that the tens of listeners that are listening out there in podcast land
Yep.
are saying to themselves, aren't we really stating the obvious?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. Well, not for everybody. Some people. We said this earlier before we started recording. Is there a percentage of the human community that are quite happy not connecting? Do you remember that
that's
conversation?
right.
And you suggested that what was it that it's a fundamental thing that people need people, as Barbara Streisand said. But there are people that need less.
That's right.
Okay,
they can get by.
Okay, so of the 7 listeners that we have right now, there's probably at least one of those out there who's quite happy with my own company, quite happy not going out, quite happy watching television or doing my hobby, and I don't necessarily have to connect and listen or be listened to.
Yeah.
But you were suggesting that at some point it's important, yeah?
Well, yeah, what I'm suggesting is that, of the 7 listeners, one's already said they're quite happy.
Yeah.
There might be 2 others that are thinking, why are they talking about such an obvious topic? Everyone knows that they need to listen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's probably about the skills on how to listen, and maybe not everyone knows all those little bits and pieces that can help you be a good listener. Yeah.
And when might I identify that I need to address those skills?
That's a good question.
Yeah, because the reason I raise this is because I notice sometimes with our boys at home, we've got 2 teenagers that live at home with us. I notice sometimes that their communication and their interaction with me can be heightened if I sense that they feel like I don't hear them. And so what happens is, I think sometimes the response is to either talk louder, to talk with an annoyed tone in their voice, to talk over me, or to even stop talking and say, just forget it.
Okay, so the clues that just maybe you're not listening as well as you could be is the way that people react.
Yeah,
when
that's
they're around
right.
you. Okay, and some of those would be they get annoyed, they get angry,
Yeah.
they raise their voice, they walk away.
Yeah, they walk away.
Yeah.
They tell me just to forget it. They shut the conversation down. They sulk.
Okay.
Sulk is probably a good word. And maybe I'm just describing all my own behaviours when I don't feel listened to. In fact, I am. Okay. I'm describing my own behaviours when I don't feel listened to. But I think what's really cool about that is perhaps there's some of the indicators. So if you're talking to somebody and they're giving you those signals back, and we're pretty clever human beings, right? We've got a radar that says we know when a conversation's going well or it's going off the rails. If we're all honest with one another, we know that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're getting those signals on your, human emotion radar, then perhaps it's worth considering, am I really hearing this person?
Yeah, and so all of those flags or clues, if you like, of relationships, of conversations being shut down or not going well, and you feel they're not going well. And if you're in business or sales, your sales are down, or your the relationships with clients are down, and you're thinking, well, what's going on there?
Oh, yeah.
So if you already know in the back of your mind that the basics of sales is to relieve your customer's pain. And if relieving someone's pain, people like to vent.
Yeah.
So they want to get out their pain, and in order to do that, they need to be heard.
Yeah.
So if you're in a sales situation and you say to someone, so what is it that I can do for you? If you don't listen to what's causing them pain, then you're not going to be able to relieve it, are you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. Listen, I'm supposed to be the sales expert.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
So I'll talk about the business stuff.
Okay.
You talk about the human stuff.
Yeah, they all cross over.
Yeah.
They cross over.
Look, and I actually think you're spot on. And I think there's been times where I've pitched for business and I've not been successful in that pitch. Not all the time, but sometimes. And I've not been successful in that pitch.
Yeah.
And it's because I probably haven't really heard what they want.
Yeah, and that's the same if you're marketing a business. If you're doing a business plan and you're going, okay, what is it? What are my goals? What are strategies? What's my business plan? You go, okay, well, firstly, I need to know my market. And to know your market, you want to know what's the pain in your market that they're looking to have relieved.
And let me ask this then, which links beautifully into that. How easy is it to listen without bias?
Well, I've done a little bit of research on this recently about cognitive bias, right? And that we all have that. So there's no getting away from that, and also ego, right? So all we can ever do, all I ever do, is to be aware of it, have some mindfulness around my
Your personal bias?
my built-in biases and because I'm a work in progress, we all are, and this is a practice. I just try to notice when that stuff gets in the way of my relationships, both in personally and in business. So I think we need to explore this a little bit more, because particularly for me in a sales role, when I'm selling, wanting to have people hearing what I'm wanting to hear, and filtering out the bits that don't serve me well, perhaps is to my detriment. okay.
So you're saying practice some form of mindfulness, so some form of awareness during the conversation that says, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable with this,
Yep.
or this isn't meeting my expectation.
Notice.
This isn't going how I wanted it to go.
That's it. Yeah. Notice what's happening within yourself. Be open to what is, and allow, and do your best to practice that not getting in the way of connecting with another human being, whether that's a personal or a business relationship.
Yeah, and it reminds me, and I think I sort of touched on this little saying earlier on about the difference between listening and just waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah.
You know, just waiting for the gap.
Yeah.
To be able to say something. So okay, so we've kind of talked about how if or to sum up where we're at this point in time, we've talked about how listening is important because it is actually an easy way to connect with others.
Yeah.
If you listen well,
Yeah.
you kind of get a door into their world, don't you?
You do.
And if you get a door into their world, then you're going to be able to connect with them.
Yeah, and you'll be open, be aware of your own biases, and just be actively listening though, with some skills that go along with that.
And we've also touched on how if there's conflict in your conversations with the person that you're interacting with, and that conversation isn't going well, then that could be an indicator that you're actually not hearing them properly.
That's true.
So they're kind of acting out their frustration that they're not being heard.
That's true. They could also be having a bad day. So So you're not always responsible for your conversation reactions. But if you can at least be aware that you may be affecting that, then it will certainly help in those conversations. But you can also have someone who's having a really bad day and something's really happening in their life that you're not aware of that they're not willing to share.
Yeah.
Which then you could spend the rest of the day going, geez, I wonder what I did wrong there, when in fact you didn't do anything wrong. You were just present to someone who wasn't in the business of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. But if you are with someone where you might be able to change your approach
Sure.
based on really hearing what they've got to say, then that's kind of exciting, because that's, to me, that's where the whole psychology of being in the space of somebody else comes into play, because the only person I ultimately have power over is myself.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I can change is my own personal approach.
Yep.
I can't change their stubbornness. I can't change their heightened voice. I can't. I can change what I do and see if that has an effect.
That's it. And the key to that, I think, is just to be open to being present to someone and to hold space.
That's an interesting concept.
For you both to be in.
You're listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. Do you want to spread the word in your workplace, community, team or school? We're available to speak at your event or deliver customised training. Visit fortitudeatwork.com.au for more info.
Okay, so I guess what we're really doing now is we're easing into, well, how do I listen, and how do I be a master listener? How do I actually do that? And so you've just touched on something called holding space. You hold space for someone.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It can never be understated, the value in being present to another human being. All of the exit polls of people leaving counselling relationships will tell you that the part of that therapeutic alliance that they had with that person was all about the relationship. It wasn't necessarily about all of the tactics or the types or the CBT or the positive psychology or the all of the different types of therapies. It was actually about how they felt in the presence of that other human being, and how that relationship was made them feel more at ease and more open to express how they feel.
I agree. And look, I would argue that's exactly why people buy off one another in business.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever really fundamental. Maybe, if you go into Woolworths and you're buying your peanut butter, it is.
Sure.
But, for a major purchase,
It's an emotional.
it's a relationship that you have with the seller.
Yeah, yeah. So the question of how important is it to hold space for someone, for me it's fundamental in all relationships. So if you can create a space or an environment where someone feels safe and comfortable and happy to be vulnerable, then you've done an excellent job.
How do you create that space?
Okay. Well, there's a whole bunch of skills, and over the time that I've been in training people on how to listen, there was something that sort of hit me a few years ago, and that was all of the books and all of the studies on how to listen to people. It was sort of strange. I realised one day that it's actually an intrinsic part of human behaviour. And that the books were people that had already who'd worked that out, just went and wrote it down.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of us already have that as part of who we are. We already know how to have eye contact. We already know how to nod, just like you are now. Okay, and we want to.
Yeah, that translates so well in a podcast. My nodding.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It does. And also, if you're on the phone, and yes, and things like that. So
the minimals they're called, aren't they?
Yep, minimal responses, and all of the reflections, and or you can repeat back to someone in your own words and paraphrase that you're. It sounds like you're saying this.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about actually echoing or responding with the words that says, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying this.
That's it.
Okay.
So if you go,
did you like how I did that then, Johnny?
That's it. That's it. So 101 with body language, if you're present face to face to someone, and being open and honest and wide-eyed and looking them in the eye. The nods and the minimal responses, the slight echoes when you just a word or a phrase that lets them know that you're hearing them, that sort of thing. And then you can move on to more active listening skills like a reflection of meaning, a reflection of content. So if you say something to me, just make a statement to me, and I'll give you a quick example. You do a bit of a little role play if you like.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, so let's just say, and thanks for putting me on the spot here.
No, that's good.
That's just terrific.
That's my job.
Let's just say that on the way here today, because I was very, unusually incorrect, it was causing me, I guess, a little bit of anxiety around that. And for a moment, I actually, I guess, had lost my bearings. So, so I was probably a bit snappy about that, I think.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying that on the way here there was some stress and some anxiety around that situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to jump out a roll, so just to reflect what you said.
Yeah.
With my attempted understanding it in a respectful way, and also in it's tentative, right?
Yeah.
So it's never. So you're saying you were angry. You say I could tell that maybe you were feeling anxious and a little frustrated with what was happening in that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there, John, is you don't jump in and assume that you know straight away. Like take a tentative approach, I think is the word that you said, right?
That's it.
So is it okay to then, if you're really trying to get meta to what you're doing and you're really trying to improve your listening skills, then there might be some key bridging statements that soften that reflections. So it sounds like.
Yeah, that's it. So attentive, and if you're a structured person and you've recognised that, and this was me, by the way, you're a person that likes structure, you're a person who likes to feel safe with boundaries, and you don't quite know what to say, you can actually have some very standard statements that can help you be a present listener.
Great. What are they? Tell us all.
Okay. Well, the standard that I used many years ago, and it was the only thing that got me over the line in even suggesting that I was able to listen to anyone, was things like, it sounds like you're saying this because of that.
Right.
So it sounds like you were feeling anxious because of that conversation. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Great.
So it sounds like you're feeling this because of that. Tell me more about that. So that was the standard way of validating what they said, tentatively, and then an open question to ask more about.
Yeah, great.
That.
Great.
Yeah.
And I actually use that sentence nowadays to try and demonstrate that I'm listening to somebody, because I find I need that structure to make sure that I am actively participating in the conversation. So it sounds like
you're feeling
getting lost today.
Yeah, you're feeling lost.
Yeah.
Because of that conversation.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what that felt like for you.
Yeah, great. So that's a good way to engage you in strong listening skills, because you really can't say it sounds like X if you didn't listen to what the person said.
That's it. So you being present means actually listening and hearing the words. And as people who have intrinsic empathy are very good at that. They'll straight away they'll go, I can get the feeling that you're feeling lost, or I can hear that you're angry. Or
that's great. Can we just go back and grab those two? So you've just thrown in two other entry points.
Yep.
I get the feeling that.
Yeah.
That's another great one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're really not only listening to the words, but you're going to be picking up on the tone that somebody is using in their conversation.
And the language as well. So, have people that speak auditory or visually.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I saw this, or I heard this, or I felt this. You can mirror those as well. So if you've got a person who talks from a feeling perspective, and they say, I felt overwhelmed, then you can say, I get the feeling like there was a lot of weight. You're carrying a lot of weight there, on your shoulders. And
great.
You can mirror that type of language.
Yeah, great. And I really like those kinds of entry points, I'll call them, very technical term there. I get the feeling that it sounds like, I often say, would I be right do you think that's okay? Would I be right in saying that was a bit stressful for you?
Sure. Well, remembering too that you are you.
Yeah.
So we're not suggesting that everyone go and become another person. We're saying use your built-in compassion.
Yeah.
To say things that attentively. So
Yeah.
you say I might have this wrong, but it's almost like you're saying this.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
And that's quite different to just jumping in because, excuse me, I was a, well, you know, because you're married to me, but corporate trainer for years and years and years. And so I have taught probably hundreds of lessons on listening skills and the old paraphrasing and, you know, restating comes up in everything. But what we're talking about today is a much higher distinction around that basic skill of paraphrasing, where it is that tentative, non-assumptive, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Assumptive, not assuming that you know.
That's it, and without agenda. And I know we talked about biases
good point.
earlier. So if it's non-judgmental.
Yeah.
So someone says, I just ran over a kitten, okay?
Yeah.
and I don't quite know how to manage that, right?
Yeah.
So if a judgmental response would be, you ran over a kitten,
Yeah.
okay? Or you could say, oh, that sounds, I can tell from your voice that it's almost like you're in shock.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. What are you feeling?
Yeah.
Right? And that has no judgment.
Yeah.
It's unconditional.
Yeah.
And you're not, there's no agenda there other than wanting to know what it's like to be them in this moment.
Yeah.
So if you stay on the track of, and if you can use mindfulness, and you want to be present to someone who wants to talk about their day or their pain or their fear, then with empathy, just do your best to help them explain to you about what it's like to be them in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, let's call it, that doesn't come naturally to everybody.
No. Well, some it does.
Some people it does.
Yeah, I've noticed that, yeah. And some people have all different, the spectrum of connectedness and with conversation and vocabulary and that sort of stuff. But yeah, some people, for me, definitely. When I first entered the industry of listening, I wasn't very good. In fact, I was very close to not being allowed to go to that next step because I just couldn't get my empathy. I couldn't get the language, couldn't get the words.
And I think that's the key. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about this in the other episodes, but it was a year ago, so I'd have to go and revisit them. But the word you keep talking about quite a lot is empathy. Yeah. And I think that's quite different. And Brené Brown does a great job of this, doesn't she? Distinguishing empathy from sympathy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really a good, effective listener has an empathetic tone.
Yeah.
And not a sympathetic tone.
No, I'm not feeling sorry for you. I'm just trying to get an idea of what it's like to walk in your shoes.
Yeah.
And to get an idea of how you feel in this moment.
Because going back to that horrific example of running over a kitten.
Yes.
Thanks for that one.
I thought I'd go straight there. Yeah.
I think you highlighted empathy extremely well. It sounds like that must have been just a very stressful situation.
Yeah,
for
or
you.
I get the feeling, and it's rather than a guess. And if they're looking at you and they're wide-eyed and they're going, "Oh my God, what's happened?"
Yeah, I've just run over a kitten.
Yeah, it's not a big stretch to say it's almost like you're in shock.
Yeah, I get the feeling that this has been traumatic for you.
Yes, am I close? Just checking.
Whereas somebody who perhaps comes from a more of a sympathetic standpoint might sound a little bit more like, oh, that must have been tough on you.
Yeah, that's it. Or you go, oh, poor dear. Oh, poor dear. You poor thing. Oh, you must feel terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and sometimes I think sympathy, from that approach, and sometimes sympathy is appropriate in some circumstances, but it's not necessarily a core listening skill. But that approach sometimes with sympathy almost inherently says, I'm so glad I'm not you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's not being, you're not walking with them.
Yeah, you're not walking with them. You're kind of going,
you're witnessing their troubles.
Oh, I'm glad I wasn't in the car at the time when you ran over that kitten.
That's true, yeah.
So I guess really good listeners understand the difference between empathy and sympathy, don't they?
Yeah, and if we move along this structure of a listening relationship, And we start with all of the body language and eye contact and the minimal responses and the echoes. And
That's all the easy stuff.
yeah,
really,
there you
isn't
go.
it?
And we've got reflection of feeling and context sounds like you're feeling this because of that. And your empathy to try and grab the feeling or to guess at the feeling, to check it with them. And then you can, other little structures along the way around just a summary, a small summary every once in a while, either in your own words. You know, we've been talking for a while, and you're telling me about this, and how shocked you are about what's happened this morning. And after being talking for a while, you know, it sounds like you're getting to some sort of sense around that. So you create a small summary of where you're up to, and that's a good idea to put in if you have a pause in the conversation where we feel like you're stuck. You can just go and do a quick summary of what's been happening in the conversation so far, and often that lubricates it to move forward.
A bit like I did earlier on in this episode of the podcast.
That's it. Yes, very good, very good. Yeah, you said just want to bring this together. That's it.
I just want to. We're going to wrap up very soon, but I just wanted to flip over and perhaps talk a bit about the person who is being heard.
Yeah.
Who's being heard. So you've got the listener who's actively out there listening, and then there's the person who's being heard. And the reason that I bring that up is because a couple of months ago I was a keynote speaker at a conference, and I was sharing the platform with a guy, a really lovely guy, who was speaking just after me. I was up first. And I went up and did my presentation. There was about 300 people in the room. It was a gorgeous conference centre. And I went and did my presentation. And he'd been standing up the back of the room and had obviously put quite a lot of effort into listening to what I had to say. Mm-hmm. Because when he got on stage, he did a gorgeous job of building continuity in the message. So kind of building on what I had to say and referring to me quite a bit throughout his presentation. The problem was he got my name wrong. So when he got up on stage, he kept saying, and as Lorraine has just said, da-da-da-da-da. And so what happened was, because I was standing up the back with a couple of the conference organisers, and we were fairly close, I guess, to the back tables of the event, every time he said my name wrong, people would look at me and go, he's got your name wrong. And then the people at the back tables would turn around and look at me.
Oh, what a shame, because that would have taken away from his message.
Right. Okay. So what ended up happening, I think, even from my perspective, is all I did as the listener was listen for every time he said my name because I knew he was going to get it wrong. Yeah. So what responsibility do listeners have? To those people who are not listeners, but those people who were talking, I guess. Yeah. What responsibility does the other party have?
Well, from what you've been saying, to be reasonably accurate. So to get some of the details to actually remember. Yeah. And because if you're having a conversation with someone, they're talking about something and they're talking about their child or their friend, and you just keep naming the friend the wrong name, or you got the wrong dates, or you got the wrong country, then that can disconnect, if you like. Yeah. So getting it right.
Or likewise too, giving people a break. Maybe thinking about it that way too. So if they're trying to paraphrase, if they're trying to engage in the conversation with you and they get things wrong, maybe let that go. Don't get hung up on the fact that, they can't even, they haven't even got my name right. Yeah. Maybe just let that go and let them try to connect with you.
Yeah, so, what you're talking about is...
I'm kind of trying to switch it a
bit.
Yeah,
no, I get that. So everyone listening to him may have missed some really good stuff because they were concentrating. Yeah, okay, including you.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah, okay.
Including me.
Okay, so rather than in that, so if you're having a conversation with someone and they have misquoted you, or they've got the wrong feeling with you, you can certainly clarify, or you can let it go.
Yeah.
Absolutely, if you want to stay connected.
Yeah, clarify or let it go. So I guess, we're talking about the removal of ego and the removal of bias from both parties.
Yeah.
We have an equal responsibility to do that and to give each other a break.
Yeah.
In that conversation.
To have unconditional positive regard or unconditional love.
Yeah.
is to accept people for who they are and where they're at,
Yeah.
and to not not to judge them.
Yeah. Even when they make direction mistakes, would you say, in the car? What do you think?
Yeah, I should let that go. Yeah, that would be nice.
Good. I think that's a pretty good way to end the episode, Johnny.
Yeah, that's true. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been fantastic. All right. And next week, I think, what are we going to talk about next week, Johnny?
Was it stress?
Stress. That's right. You've
Okay.
been listening to me.
Oh,
Well
there you
done.
go. There you go.
So yeah, next week we're going to talk about stress and how to manage stress and the role that stress plays on all of us in our lives.
The good stress, the healthy stress, the unhealthy stress.
Yeah. Come back, everybody.
Yeah.
Listen to us next week. Tell your friends. Bring your friends. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections with Leanne and John. Connect with us via Facebook at Fortitude at Work. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. See you next time.